Hello everyone. Before we dive into the chilling story I've carefully crafted for you today, think about this. Have you ever felt a shiver down your spine while listening to a news report? A strange tale, something so terrifying that it felt less like reality and more like a twisted nightmare? That is exactly the feeling I've tried to capture in the story you're about to experience. If you enjoy gripping stories that push the boundaries of suspense and delve into the darkest corners of the human soul, then make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss any of my future journeys into the unknown. Your support is what brings these stories to life. Now, prepare yourself, because what comes next is a journey into the darkness that once cast its shadow over an entire nation. The city of Portland, Oregon, often celebrated for its eccentric charm, verdant landscapes, and a countercultural spirit, awoke to an unusually crisp autumn morning in September. The air, typically mild and rain-kissed, carried a faint, unsettling chill that seemed to seep into the bones long before the news channels began their frantic reports. It was a chill that foreshadowed the true coldness about to descend upon the city, a shadow that would stretch across the nation and etch itself into the collective memory of a horrified public. The first victim was found by a jogger in Forest Park, nestled amidst the dense canopy of ancient trees that cradled the city's western edge. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned pediatric surgeon known for her tireless work at Legacy Emmanuel Medical Center and her infectious, radiant optimism, lay prone beside a winding trail. Her usually vibrant auburn hair was fanned out against the damp earth, a stark contrast to the pale, almost ethereal quality of her skin. The jogger, a young woman named Clara, first thought it was a hiker resting, perhaps fallen ill. But as she approached, the unnatural stillness, the precise, almost artistic placement of Evelyn's hands, and the horrifying crimson bloom on her pristine white running shirt, sent a scream tearing from Clara's throat that echoed through the otherwise peaceful woods. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face carried the weathered lines of 2 decades on the force, arrived at the scene with his partner, Detective Lena Hansen. Corbin, a stocky man with a perpetually tired gaze that missed nothing, surveyed the tableau with a practiced, grim efficiency. Hansen, sharper and more methodical, meticulously photographed the scene, her keen eyes scanning for any anomaly, any telltale sign the killer might have left behind. "No signs of struggle, Miles," Hansen observed, her voice low. "She looks peaceful. Too peaceful." Corbin knelt, careful not to disturb anything. Evelyn Reed had been stabbed multiple times, a brutal, frenzied attack, yet her body was arranged almost reverently. Her eyes were closed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. It was macabre, unsettling. "Check her pockets, MPD, anything out of place," Corbin instructed the forensic team already swarming the perimeter. Moments later, a technician called out, "Detective, found something." In her left hand, Corbin moved closer. Clutched loosely in Evelyn Reed's lifeless fingers was a small, intricately carved wooden chess piece. A black queen. It was pristine, polished, utterly out of place, and chillingly symbolic. "A chess piece," Hansen muttered, her brow furrowed. "What the hell does that mean?" The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Reed's murder sent shockwaves through the medical community and beyond. She was universally loved, a beacon of hope for countless families. The sheer senselessness of her death, coupled with the bizarre calling card of the Black Queen, baffled the Portland Police Bureau. There were no immediate suspects, no forced entry if she had been abducted, no clear motive beyond pure, unadulterated malice. The media, initially cautious, soon picked up on the chilling details, and the name the Forest Park Killer began to circulate, a whisper of dread that soon became a shout. 3 weeks later, the whispers turned into a roar. The second victim was Mark Jensen, a dynamic tech entrepreneur who had recently sold his startup for millions, pouring much of his newfound wealth into local charities. Jensen was found in his sprawling, minimalist loft apartment in the Pearl District, a vibrant, upscale neighborhood. The scene was disturbingly similar. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, and an eerie, almost serene arrangement of the body. He too had been stabbed repeatedly, but like Reed, His expression was one of unnerving calm, and in his right hand, clenched as if in a final, defiant gesture, was another chess piece, a black knight. Corbin stared at the black knight, then at the glossy photographs of the Black Queen. "It's him," he stated, his voice flat. "The same signature. Two successful, prominent citizens. No connection we can find. Why these people? Why now?" Hansen's tablet glowed, displaying a rudimentary profile. Both in their late 30s, early 40s. Highly respected, active in the community, seemingly no enemies, and both at the peak of their lives. The revelation of a second murder, bearing the identical, chilling signature, ignited a firestorm. The local news channels turned their entire programming over to the unfolding horror. National outlets quickly followed suit. "Serial killer targets Portland's elite," screamed headlines across the country. The Forest Park killer was no longer a local tragedy. He was a national nightmare. Panic began to ripple through Portland. People who had once relished the city's safety now looked over their shoulders. Evening strolls became nervous dashes. Restaurants saw a dip in patronage. A vibrant city began to draw inward, consumed by fear. Mayor Thorne held an emergency press conference, flanked by a grim-faced police chief and an even grimmer Corbin. "We are dedicating every available resource to this investigation," Thorne declared, his voice strained. "We will catch this monster." But his words, meant to reassure, rang hollow against the backdrop of an increasingly terrified populace. Corbin and Hansen worked tirelessly, their office at the central precinct a maelstrom of white bards, red string, and coffee cups. They interviewed family, friends, colleagues, anyone who had crossed paths with Reed and Jensen. They delved into financial records, phone logs, social media profiles. Nothing. Both victims led impeccably clean lives, admired by all. The only common thread was their success, their public image of happiness and contribution. What if it's not about who they were, but what they represented? Hansen mused one late night, staring at a cluster map of Portland, with pins marking the two murder sites. Two pillars of the community, a healer and an innovator. Corbin rubbed his temples. And the chess pieces, queen, knight, high-value pieces. Is he playing a game with us, Lena, or with them? The killer, whom the media had now dubbed the Crimson Shadow, for the silent, bloody trail he left behind, seemed to relish the chaos. He was a ghost, leaving no fingerprints, no viable DNA, nothing but the macabre tableau and the enigmatic chess pieces. The city was on edge, a collective gasp held in its throat, waiting for the next move in a game only the killer understood. Then came the third murder, a month after Jensen's. This time, the victim was Sarah Jenkins, a beloved history professor at Portland State University, revered for her progressive activism and fierce intellect. Her body was found not in an isolated park or a private residence, but in a quiet reading room of the Multnomah County Central Library, a place where she often worked late. The library, a public sanctuary of knowledge, was now a scene of desecration. The horror was amplified by the public nature of the location, even if she was found after closing hours. The chess piece this time, a black rook. The pattern was solidifying, yet the motive remained elusive. Reed, Jensen, Jenkins, a surgeon, an entrepreneur, a professor. Three prominent, accomplished individuals, all seemingly at the apex of their careers and personal lives, all taken with brutal efficiency, yet left in a state of eerie repose, clutching a black chess piece. The national media went into a frenzy. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC led with the Portland story. Experts on serial killers flooded the airwaves, offering theories ranging from a disillusioned former employee to a sophisticated domestic terrorist. The FBI dispatched a specialized behavioral analysis unit to assist the overwhelmed local police. Agent Clara Hayes, a sharp, no-nonsense profiler, joined Corbin and Hansen's task force. "He's escalating," Hayes stated, her voice calm but authoritative, as she presented her initial findings to the task force. The move from a secluded park to a private residence, and now to a public institution, indicates an increasing boldness, a growing confidence. He's challenging us. The chess pieces, they suggest a game, yes, but also a specific order, a hierarchy. He's choosing his targets carefully, perhaps based on their perceived societal value or what they represent to him. Corbin looked at the grim faces of his team. Fear was a palpable entity in Portland. Schools were implementing stricter security. Neighborhood watch groups sprung up overnight. The city, once a symbol of quirky independence, now felt like a cage, its residents prisoners of an unseen predator. Lena Hansen, poring over crime scene photos for the 100th time, noticed something subtle, almost imperceptible. In each photo of the victims, despite the horrific nature of their deaths, there was a faint, almost benign expression on their faces. Not fear, not pain, but something akin to acceptance, even a strange serenity. "Miles," she called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Look at this. Their expressions. It's not just the placement. Their faces. It's like they weren't fighting. Or maybe they were. At peace." Corbin walked over, squinting at the blown-up images. He saw it. The faint, almost imperceptible curve of a lip, the relaxation of the brow. It was unsettling beyond measure. "He's not just killing them, Lena," Corbin said, a cold dread seeping into his voice. "He's doing something to them before. He's making them accept it. He's taking away their fear." The thought was more terrifying than the brutality of the murders themselves. The Crimson Shadow wasn't just a killer. He was a manipulator of the very fabric of human emotion, an artist of death who orchestrated not just the end of a life, but the very manner of its passing. And as the nights grew longer and the autumn leaves began to fall, painting the city in hues of red and gold, a chill deeper than the approaching winter settled over Portland, a chill born of the chilling realization that their tormentor was not merely a monster, but a master of psychological warfare. The game had just begun, and the Crimson Shadow held all the pieces. The fourth victim, Tommy Miller, brought the horror even closer to home. Miller was a beloved high school football coach, known for transforming troubled youths into disciplined athletes. His body was discovered in the locker room of Lincoln High, slumped against the row of metal lockers he had so often slammed his fist against in motivational speeches. Like the others, he was posed, almost kneeling in a supplicant position. The signature chess piece, a black bishop, the murder of a figure so deeply embedded in the community, especially one connected to children, sent an unprecedented wave of terror through Portland. Schools across the city went into lockdown, sporting events were canceled, and a frantic debate erupted over whether to close all public institutions until the killer was caught. The parents were in a frenzy. Detective Corbin felt the weight of the city pressing down on him. His eyes, already perpetually tired, now held a deep, unshakable weariness. The Crimson Shadow was not only escalating his targets but also increasing the frequency. For victims in 2 months, the FBI's presence grew, with Agent Hayes and her team now practically embedded in the precinct. "He's choosing targets that represent the pillars of a community," Agent Hayes explained during a tense briefing. Evelyn Reed, healer, caregiver. Mark Jensen, innovator, economic driver. Sarah Jenkins, educator, intellectual. Thomas Miller, mentor, shaper of youth. He's systematically dismantling the idealized image of Portland, one prominent figure at a time. "But why?" Hansen asked, gesturing at the cluster map of crime scenes. "What's the connection between these roles and a motive? Is he angry at the system? Does he resent success?" The investigation was drowning in theories and dead ends. Hundreds of tips flooded the hotline, ranging from genuine leads to the outlandish ramblings of conspiracy theorists. Every disgruntled former employee, every rival, every social outcast was investigated, only to be cleared. The sheer precision of the killer, the lack of forensic evidence, the inexplicable serenity on the victims' faces, it all pointed to someone highly intelligent, meticulous, and deeply disturbed. Corbin found himself increasingly drawn to the chess pieces. Queen, knight, rook, bishop, all black, all high-ranking pieces. He spent hours studying chess strategies, hoping to glean some insight into the killer's mind. Was he playing a strategic game? Was he trying to checkmate the city or the police? The pieces aren't random, Corbin mused to Hansen one evening, staring at a chessboard he'd set up in his office. He's taking out the power players first. What's left? The king and the pawns. Does he see himself as the king? Or is he setting up to take down the ultimate king? Hansen, meanwhile, had begun to focus on the victims' personal lives, searching for the minutest detail that might connect them. She dug into their pasts, their childhoods, their forgotten acquaintances. The profilers believed the motive was deeply personal, perhaps rooted in a past injustice, a profound betrayal that the killer now sought to avenge on a symbolic stage. Hayes thinks he's an avenging angel type, Hansen explained. Someone who believes he's rectifying a wrong, judging those he perceives as having prospered at the expense of others, or those who embody what he despises. But who did these 4 people wrong? And how is it connected? The pressure from the media and the public was immense. Nightly vigils were held across Portland, pleas for safety echoing through the streets. The city, once so vibrant, felt muted, its laughter stifled by a pervasive fear. The mayor's approval ratings plummeted. The police chief's job was on the line. Corbin felt the weight of it all, the faces of the victims haunting his dreams. He remembered a detail from the Miller case, a small, faded tattoo on the coach's bicep. An emblem of an eagle clutching a lightning bolt. It was a common symbol, but for some reason it stuck in Corbin's mind. He had seen it somewhere before. Days later, while reviewing cold cases from 2 decades prior, Corbin stumbled upon a file that made his blood run cold. A tragic incident from 20 years ago involving a catastrophic fire at a youth summer camp, the Eagle Ridge Outdoor Academy, located just outside Portland. 7 teenagers had died. The camp director and several counselors had faced charges of negligence, but ultimately, due to a loophole and a powerful legal team, they were acquitted. The case had been largely forgotten, overshadowed by time. Corbin looked at the victim list from the current case, then at the list of counselors and key figures from the Eagle Ridge fire. A chilling pattern began to emerge. Evelyn Reed, the surgeon, had been the camp doctor on duty that fateful summer. Mark Jensen, the entrepreneur, had been a junior counselor, a rising star, cleared of any wrongdoing. Sarah Jenkins, the professor, had been part of the camp's advisory board, instrumental in its funding. Thomas Miller, the coach, had been the head of outdoor activities, another key figure cleared. The eagle clutching the lightning bolt? It was the emblem of the Eagle Ridge Outdoor Academy. Corbin's breath hitched. "Lena! Agent Hayes! Get in here!" he roared. When they converged, Corbin laid out his findings. The old files spread across his desk. This isn't random. It's revenge. All 4 victims were connected to the Eagle Ridge Outdoor Academy tragedy from 20 years ago. Agent Hayes's eyes widened. My God, an old wound, festering for decades. He's targeting those he holds responsible for the deaths of those children. Hansen quickly cross-referenced the names. The director of the camp, Robert Sterling, is still alive, and the main lawyer who defended them, Arthur Blackwood. They were the most prominent figures involved in the acquittal. And the chess pieces, Corbin added, his voice low, a new light of understanding dawning in his tired eyes. Queen, knight, rook, bishop. These were the high-value pieces in the camp hierarchy. He's systematically dismantling the power structure that he believes allowed the guilty to walk free. The new lead invigorated the task force. The killer wasn't random. He was methodical, patient, and driven by a deep-seated grievance. The serenity on the victims' faces suddenly made horrifying sense. The killer wasn't just taking their lives. He was making them confront their past, perhaps even absolving them in his twisted mind, or forcing them to acknowledge their complicity before their death. The profile now sharpened. A survivor of the fire, or a close relative of one of the deceased campers. Someone intelligent, capable of meticulous planning, and harboring a powerful sense of injustice. Someone who felt overlooked, ignored, while those he blamed prospered. The new theory hit the media like a bombshell. The Crimson Shadow was no longer an abstract boogeyman. He was a vengeful ghost from the past, exposing a forgotten scandal. The national narrative shifted from fear of a random killer to a deeper, more unsettling question. Had justice truly been served 2 decades ago? The pressure intensified on Robert Sterling, the former camp director, and Arthur Blackwood, the lawyer. Both were placed under police protection, though they scoffed at the idea of a 20-year-old grievance. "This is absurd," Sterling fumed to reporters, his face pale. "That was a tragic accident. We were cleared." But the Crimson Shadow wasn't listening to appeals. He was playing his own game on his own terms. A week later, a package arrived at the Portland Police Bureau, addressed to Detective Miles Corbin. It contained no return address, no fingerprints. Inside was a single item, a small black pawn chess piece. It was accompanied by a cryptic, typewritten note. "The game is not over, detective. You have found my pieces, but you do not know my board. The king remains, and the pawns await their turn. The truth always emerges, even from the ashes." Corbin stared at the pawn, then at the note. The killer was now directly taunting him. He was acknowledging their progress, but also mocking their slowness. The inclusion of the pawn was particularly chilling. It meant the killer intended to target those who were considered less significant, perhaps the pawns who had also played a part, or those he felt were manipulated, leading to his endgame. It was a promise of continued horror, a declaration that the game was far from over. The city held its breath. The stakes had never been higher. The Crimson Shadow was not just avenging a past tragedy. He was challenging the very concept of justice, daring the police to stop him before he completed his twisted checkmate. Corbin knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the final moves in this deadly game would be the most dangerous of all. The pawn arrived, a stark declaration of the Crimson Shadow's intent. It wasn't merely a threat. It was a promise that the next victims would be different, perhaps those who were once overlooked, lesser players in the grand scheme of his vengeance. The pressure on Detectives Corbin and Hansen and Agent Hayes's FBI team became unbearable. The city of Portland, now deeply entrenched in the national psyche as the stage for this chilling drama, watched with bated breath. The media, no longer just reporting, actively speculated on the identity of the killer, feeding the city's paranoia. Corbin and Hansen focused their efforts on identifying anyone who might fit the profile of a surviving relative or a profoundly impacted individual from the Eagle Ridge fire. They scoured old-school records, hospital reports, and social services files. Agent Hayes, meanwhile, worked with her profilers to refine the killer's psychological portrait. Highly intelligent, possibly in a technical or analytical field, deeply secretive, and possessing an almost theatrical flair for symbolism. He was likely a loner, meticulous, and patient. "He's not just seeking revenge," Hayes explained, gesturing at a complex flow chart of motives. "He's building a narrative. The chess pieces, the specific choice of victims, the theatrical staging of the crime scene, it's all part of a larger story he's telling. A story of injustice and his version of rectification." Days blurred into weeks. The task force was a hive of activity, chasing down every thread, no matter how tenuous. They identified 2 surviving campers from the fire, now adults, both leading quiet lives. They were interviewed extensively, their grief still palpable, but neither fit the profile of a meticulous, highly organized killer. Several relatives of the deceased were also investigated, but again, no definitive link. Then, a break. Hansen, revisiting the financial records of the Eagle Ridge Outdoor Academy, stumbled upon a discrepancy. A significant sum of money, intended for the victims' families in the aftermath of the fire, had been diverted into a lesser-known scholarship fund established shortly after the acquittals. The fund, overseen by a former camp administrator named Eleanor Vance, had quietly dissolved years later, its assets mysteriously depleted. Eleanor Vance had died a few years prior, leaving no apparent heirs. However, further digging revealed that Eleanor Vance had a nephew, her only living relative, who had worked as a junior accountant for the camp for a brief period before the fire, and was responsible for managing some of the smaller ancillary funds. His name was Arthur Finley. He had been a quiet, unassuming young man, ostracized by many after the fire due to his connection to the camp's administration, even though he was never implicated in any wrongdoing. He vanished from public records shortly after the fund's disappearance, moving out of state. Arthur Finley, Hansen repeated, staring at his grainy, 20-year-old photo. He was 22 at the time of the fire. His aunt oversaw the fund that disappeared. He worked for the camp. He would have known the victims' roles, and he would have witnessed the corruption firsthand. Corbin felt a surge of adrenaline. Find him, Lena. Where is he now? The search for Arthur Finley was a frantic race against time. They tracked him through old addresses, credit card records, and a few online profiles under a different name. He had changed his identity, lived a quiet, almost invisible life, moving frequently. His last known address was an unassuming apartment in the suburbs of Beaverton, just outside Portland. He worked as a freelance software developer, a solitary existence, perfectly suiting the profile of a meticulous, intelligent loner. As the team mobilized, a chilling discovery was made back at Finley's old apartment. Among his belongings, which had been put into storage, they found a collection of meticulously carved wooden chess pieces, identical to the ones left at the crime scenes, and a detailed blueprint of a building. The building was the Oregon Convention Center, one of Portland's largest public venues, and the date marked on the blueprint was for an upcoming charity gala, hosted by Mayor Thorne, an event to honor outstanding community leaders. Robert Sterling, the former camp director, and Arthur Blackwood, the lawyer who defended the camp, were both scheduled to attend. "He's going for the king," Corbin said, his voice grim, "and he's going to make a spectacle of it." The convention center was quickly put under heavy surveillance. Undercover officers infiltrated the gala. Mayor Thorne was discreetly informed, his face paling with dread. Sterling and Blackwood, already on edge, were quietly briefed and assured of their protection. Arthur Finley, now known as Elias Thorne, an ironic choice, perhaps, given the mayor's name, moved with the precision of a ghost. He had planned this night for decades. The scholarship fund, he discovered, had been secretly siphoned off by his aunt and the camp director, Robert Sterling, to cover their legal fees and protect their reputations. His aunt, racked with guilt and fear, had confessed to him on her deathbed, revealing the full extent of the conspiracy. Finley, seeing the pillars of the community prosper while the memories of the lost children faded, had vowed to exact his own justice. The chess pieces were not just symbols of their roles, but tokens of a game where he was the hidden hand, manipulating the board. The serenity on the victims' faces, a potent sedative, allowing him to whisper his twisted truths, forcing them to acknowledge their complicity before their final breath. He planned to strike during Mayor Thorne's keynote speech, a symbolic moment where the city's leadership would be most vulnerable, and the media, gathered in force, would bear witness to his ultimate act of vengeance. He intended to reveal the full truth about the Eagle Ridge corruption, holding Sterling and Blackwood accountable not just for negligence, but for systematic cover-up and theft. Corbin, Hansen, and Hayes, along with a SWAT team, entered the convention center through a service entrance, navigating the labyrinthine corridors. The gala was in full swing, a symphony of polite chatter, clinking glasses, and orchestral music. The tension was palpable among the undercover officers. Then a sudden blackout. The lights flickered and died, plunging the main hall into chaos. Screams erupted as panic spread. In the ensuing darkness, a single spotlight clicked on, illuminating the main stage. Arthur Finley, dressed immaculately, stood behind the podium, a remote in his hand. A large screen behind him flickered to life, displaying old, grainy photos of the 7 children who died in the Eagle Ridge fire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Finley's voice boomed, distorted by a modulator, yet chillingly clear. "You celebrate your leaders, your pillars of society. But do you ever ask how they built their towers? On whose graves they stand?" As he spoke, he projected damning documents onto the screen. Bank statements, legal agreements, internal memos detailing the cover-up and the theft of the victims' families' funds. He systematically exposed Robert Sterling and Arthur Blackwood, detailing their roles, their greed, their betrayal. Sterling and Blackwood, visibly terrified, tried to escape, but were surrounded by plainclothes officers. Corbin, realizing Finley's intention was to expose, not just to kill, saw his chance. "He's not targeting the crowd. He wants a public trial," he shouted into his comms. "Get to the stage." As Finley reached the climax of his revelation, pulling out a final ornate black king chess piece, the SWAT team burst onto the stage. Finley saw them coming, a look of serene acceptance on his face, mirroring his victims. He made no move to escape, no attempt to fight. He had achieved his goal. The truth was out. "The game is over, detective," Finley said, his voice now calm, unmodulated, as Corbin confronted him. "The king has been exposed. Justice at last." He held out the black king chess piece to Corbin, a silent offering. Corbin took it, feeling the cold, smooth wood in his hand. The arrest was made without further incident. The gala devolved into pandemonium, but amidst the chaos, a new truth began to emerge. The Crimson Shadow was caught, but his words had set off a different kind of explosion. In the aftermath, Portland slowly began to heal, though the scars remained. Robert Sterling and Arthur Blackwood were arrested and charged, their reputations shattered, their past crimes brought to light. The media, initially focused on the terror, shifted to the underlying corruption, sparking a national conversation about accountability and justice. Corbin, Hansen, and Hayes were hailed as heroes, but the victory felt hollow. 7 innocent lives lost decades ago, then 5 more taken in a twisted act of vengeance. The human cost was immense. Corbin kept the black king chess piece on his desk, a constant reminder of the darkness that festered beneath the surface of even the most beautiful cities, and the complex, often tragic, pathways to justice. Arthur Finley, the Crimson Shadow, pleaded guilty to all charges. In court, he stood impassively, expressing no remorse for the deaths, only for the pain he caused the living. He testified with chilling clarity about the corruption, the cover-up, and his 2 decades of planning. His final statement to the court was simple: "I merely finished a game that others started." And in the end, the truth won. The city of Portland, scarred but stronger, slowly began to rebuild its trust, to face its past. The Crimson Shadow had brought terror, but also an undeniable truth. The game was indeed over, but its echoes would forever haunt the quiet corners of the Pacific Northwest, a stark reminder that some shadows, once cast, can never truly be erased.